We're live. So, I just resumed that. So, hello everybody at Flowing with the Spiritual Cafe. I'm so happy to see everybody today. We've got a cafe full of people. So, just want to say welcome. So we've got some lovely hosts here. There's Alison, who you've met before in the cafe. She's hosted before. And we have wonderful Phoebe. I just want to give a shout out for Phoebe because it's the first time that she's officially coming in co-hosted in the cafe. So Phoebe Salter is a celestial communicator coming from the gateway of astrology, and her subjective frame of mind of believing before seeing has charged her aura. Can see it, look. With the self-belief and magical thinking. Phoebe's mythology and family fractal birthed her into hippiedom, and I know that because I've been there, and it's a wonderful place to be. Lives on a farm with some chickens and some cockerels and some other wonderful animals there. And she comes from an illuminated ring of free thinkers and loves holding the space where wisdom may be revealed. And wisdom may be revealed is the first place I heard that phrase, and I've repeated it several times ever since. And she wants to use the language to root the changes in our world. So we'll welcome Phoebe as a co-host into the cafe with regulars Alison McCarb and Akusi Angel. And in a moment, we're going to have a wonderful conversation with my dear friend Lanie Steinher and her daughter Emily Steinher. And it's going to be a really current and wonderful conversation, and will be weaved into the current world theme at the moment, which they'll both talk about soon. But before we do that, let's just settle into the cafe and ground ourselves here on Mother Earth. So let's take 3 deep breaths in. And as you're breathing in slowly and breathing out, relax, release, and let go. Just follow your breath gently and slowly, knowing that Mother Earth is holding us and nourishing, and melting and merging with Father Sun, providing protection within the realm of the rainbow angels. We can call on them anytime. And as we breathe in and we relax and we release and we let go more, let's just say a prayer into the world for peace on our planet, everywhere, for every being, always. We thank the celestial beings, the planets, the earth, all the wisdom keepers, the light beings that are holding us today and always. And as we take 3 deep breaths, slowly, to the rhythm of our heart and the rhythm of the universal heart, we give thanks. We relax and we let go. When you're ready, come back to the room, come back to the cafe. Be present here with the presence. Maybe just shake your shoulders a little bit, and your head, your wrists. Open your eyes and come back to the room. And so I'd just like to sit back here and hand the mic over to Phoebe and Alison to welcome our really special honoured guests today.
Mhm. Would you like to introduce Lanie then, Alison?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so this sounds really good. Liberated Chef Lanie Steinher creates and facilitates intimate gatherings where she combines culinary art, music, and wholehearted sharing. Her greatest love is spiritual deep dive, which provides the foundation for her in-person workshops as well as virtual gatherings. Richard Rudd and the entire Gene Keys transmission provides the inspiration for many of the events. With raw vulnerability and transparency, Lanie, along with her wise beyond her years daughter Emily, will share their story of treading the golden path together and how it has transformed their relationship with grief, family, and ancestral feminine wounding. So welcome, Lanie and Emily.
Thank you.
And here we have Emily, Lanie's daughter. Emily Steinher is a bright, shining star here on Earth, as you can see. Daughter, sister, and beautiful, talented woman. Emily is a Gene Keys traveller with Mummy Laine, immersed in this individual and collective process, bringing into their family dynamic heart-opening, healing, and energetic shifts, tapping into light codes within the genius Gene Keys. Their story is so tender, so raw, so beautiful. So welcome, Emily and Mum.
Thank you.
Can I know you're going to start, and I just want to, I was wanting to say a thank you to Tamara Bacalo, who was taking care of the Facebook maintenance. So I just wanted to say a thank you to her. She's listening and she's really looking forward to this. And I think she heard Emily sing, and on a Facebook she was saying, maybe it's somebody else. But anyway, thank you, Tamara. And yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Tamara. Yes, I read that post, and I'm not sure if it's Emily or me or someone just named Emily or Lanie Steinher. I'm not sure. But Akusi, thank you for inviting Emily and I on the Spiritual Cafe. Thank you for the beautiful opening. Thank you to Allison and Phoebe for the lovely intros. Oh, and I wanted to keep my bio short because A, I feel like I've already lived 10 lifetimes and my resume could drone on and become quite boring. And B, because Emily and I are going to share our personal version of a poem written by George Ella Lyon titled Where I'm From, which is better suited for the story we want to share. From a Gene Keys perspective, we have many synchronicities, Emily and I. Her sun squares mine, giving us the same Gene Keys in our activation sequence. Meaning the 19th Gene Key is my purpose and is her life's work. And the reason I mention this one specifically is because the shadow frequency of codependence and the divine gift of sacrifice are reoccurring themes in our lives. We also share a 4/6 profile and have 10/6 lines in our design. I have 10/6 lines in my design, and Emily has 10/6 lines in her design, not a total of 10/6 lines. And together today we're in the 32nd Gene Key, line 1, which is my core wound, coined Ancestral Reverence by Richard Rudd in the Gene Keys book, which is the main reason why I chose this specific Wednesday to be in the cafe. And we'll talk more about our transformational journey later, but first I'll read my poem, followed by Emily. And just so you know, we will be hearing each other's versions for the first time today. I just gave her the poem and the format, and so we did it separately. So, I am from phonics flashcards, from Crisco shortening and Fresca soda pop. I am from musical scores and church hymns masterfully played on an old piano, my auntie singing in harmonic voice. I am from raspberry and blackberry bushes, fingers and knees bloody and blue stained. I'm from sprawling family reunions, tables laden with sweets and neon colored jello salads. From Adelaide and Willard. I'm from God-fearing holier than thous and jubilant square dancers. I'm from count your many blessings and money don't grow on trees. I'm from wagons heading west to the promised land, after Sunday service supper of pot roast and fluffy hand-cut biscuits slathered with freezer jam. From the ornery goat who lived in our backyard, whose milk, if you could get it, provided the only creamy white sustenance my grandfather's bowels could tolerate. I'm from the rocking horse built from a kit to keep me occupied while my grandmother cooked, cleaned, edited, and typed her spouse's doctoral thesis, and my mom worked a coveted job meant for a man.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Okay. Where I'm from, at the top of my poem, I said, I am from, so I renamed my poem. Okay. I am from the silk scarf, from Starbucks dark roast and Nikon film. I am from abstract paintings that decorate the tie-dyed walls, impressionable and complex. I am from the Japanese maple tree and the painted rocks, the ones who are always there for me. I am from the boat docks at Cedar Point and the loud talkers, from Lurie and Elaine. I am from French cooking and show tunes, from long legs and captivating a stage. I am from the freedom of perception and interaction, the universal language of love. I am from Ohio, Midwest, sourdough toast and beet salad. From the scooters that were given to the grandkids, making sure each had their own color to protect from any competitive outbreak. And from the mother whose constant musical theater outbreaks hitting the road like Jack. I am from the ones before me.
Wow.
Fab.
Brilliant. Beautiful. Thank you.
Such great intros. I love it.
So what was interesting about the poems, we didn't know what each other was going to say. However, I did know that she was basing hers on her experience with my mom, her grandmother, and I based mine on living with my grandparents until I was age 5, and my parents got married, my mom and not my bio dad, but my adopted dad. And then we still lived in Seattle until I was 7. So I had the Mormon experience, the LDS experience with them, but my mom rebelled against the Mormon religion. So ironically, we moved from Seattle to Salt Lake City, and there's nothing like being atheists in Salt Lake City when all I wanted to do was be Mormon and be baptized Mormon, so I would belong. And my mom said, absolutely not, right? And to this day, I'm thankful, because that is not a religion I would choose due to its hierarchical nature. But I did want to read, if you allow me the time, thank you, to some excerpts from the 30-second gene key because they're so relevant for the topic. So 30-second gene key, and this is from Richard Rudd's book, right? So the ability to assess the past, weeding out weaknesses and building upon strengths. As we learn once again to honor where we come from the earth, and as we learn once again to honor where we come, which is from the earth, it will teach us how to live in harmony with its natural rhythms and cycles. As we listen to the great wisdom of our ancestors, we will find our inner spirit. Once we have this as an anchor, which by the way, directly relates to my first line, 30-second gene key line 1, we can graft our modern technologies onto old wisdom and the result will be transcendent. This is the great secret of preservation, which is the gift of this 30-second gene key. So for me, the modern technology is symbolic of the great change where the feminine is coming alive and the old patriarchal hierarchy is crumbling. I am in reverence of my past, but I'm not held hostage by it. And that's been my mantra this year. So again, I talked about how I would not choose to be baptized Mormon. However, I had a very positive experience with my grandparents, and much of it colors my life today. My mom rebelled against not only the Mormon religion, but all religion. And in fact, our Bible was Mastering the Art of French Cooking, where Julia Child reigned supreme. She was our supreme being in the household. And she would crack the whip. She would have me up prepping for her elaborate parties at 6 a.m., which I still can't believe I did, but I did. And that's how I learned how to cook. We used, again, the Mastering the Art of French Cooking. She had trained with a woman who actually worked alongside Julia Child. So we would take beignets and beef tenderloin to the drive-in theater, in the car, and that would be our stack. My mom and I just had a very complex roller coaster ride of a relationship where I revered her and she taught me so much, and a big, huge part of who I am today is because of her. And she was an alcoholic, and it became more progressive and more challenging. And I fell into the role of, again, the shadow frequency of the 19th gene key, which is my purpose, Emily's life's work. I fell into the role definitely in the shadow frequency of codependence. And I wanted to be the white knight to swoop in and save her. So I really believed that she was the problem, and if she quit drinking, everything would be okay. And really, it took us going to Betty Ford, the $60,000 rehab I manipulated my mom to go to, where I had my first angel experience, a man who was in charge of my group. And he said, Lanie, you're as sick as your mom, right? Now, I don't know if he said exactly that because he was a trained counselor, but that's what I heard. And cellular certainty, again, my 10-6 lines knew that was true. And that was the only thing that I had control over, was my recovery. So hence, I started going to Codependence Anonymous, which really coincided with the birth of my first child, Ben, because I was so scared of being a mother. I was so frightened of of being something that I had rebelled against. So there's just, I guess, these themes of ancestral reverence and sacrifice, where people might see sacrifice as a low frequency, and the gene keys, it's a high frequency, which I'm totally understanding more and more. You know, going to Al-Anon and Codependent Anonymous 12-step, I sacrificed my victim mentality. My victim mentality held me afloat for years. I mean, I was glued to it. It was my identity. And I had to be humbled, right, to sacrifice and surrender that, and realize that my raging response to my mom's drinking, my obsession with wanting to fix her, was my own dis-ease. And you know, the other sacrifice was you know, two things that have to do with culinary, with food. The first was, I didn't get into culinary school right out of high school, which was odd because I did have the experience. However, I did graduate after I was married and 3 months pregnant with Ben. So that was a sacrifice of sort, because I had seen myself like going off to New York and being like the hot dog chef, and I was convinced. And then, you know, my karmic journey really was, you know, being married to Keith at the time, and having my children, and the mother wound, then, you know, transforming into a higher good, which happened and took some time, of course. And then the one last thing that I want to say before Emily speaks or you guys ask questions is, you know, we moved from Ohio, to California in 2001, right before 9/11. And as soon as my husband said, yeah, he didn't say a complete yes, he said, yeah, I'll move to California, I started planning, because I believed that I was going to be the second coming of Alice Waters, and I was going to be hobnobbing in the wine country with all the, you know, extravagant wine connoisseurs. But lo and behold, due to the sacrifice of affordability and a Montessori school, which I was eyeing, we moved to the foothills, and I ended up quitting drinking 8 months later, which was a pivotal time in my life, a sacrifice that has bared many gifts again and again and again. So that's a little bit about the family history with my mom. Emily, do you want to share about Mom? Yeah.
Well, I'll just share something that I find really interesting when I was doing the poem, and then it kind of like sparked the conversation initially here. So it's just kind of a synchronicity for me. The hardest part of the poem for me was one of the questions. It says about religion, like what are your religious beliefs that you grew up with and things like that. And it made me realize that I had a lot of freedom growing up in that aspect, to just freedom in beliefs and freedom in feelings and emotions. And I thought that compared to a lot of hearing about my mother's childhood, it is kind of transmuting that wound, because growing up in a household where I never felt like something was forced upon me at all. And I realize that now in such a different way, like seeing the 19th gene key play out in different ways, like how a lot of it is based on primal needs we needed. Like people needed something to worship, to believe in something higher than themselves. And kind of shifting now in this time, I don't really resonate with that feeling anymore, like needing something outside of ourselves. I think we all we need is ourselves, and all the answers we have are within us. And of course, inspiration and witnessing other people's wisdom is amazing. It only helps you unlock those different things within you. So I think it's really interesting kind of shifting into that. But I wanted to read something from the 19th Gene Key, because we like talking about it because it really plays different roles in mine and my mom's life. Even though we have it in our activation sequence, it's really interesting how it's woven in different ways. So it says the 19th shadow of codependence has its root deep within the ancestral past. To be codependent means to rely on outside agencies. As primitives, we primarily relied upon our survival. Because we relied upon outside agencies, we anthropos. Ooh, that's a big word, Richard Rudd. Anthropomorphic. What is it? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The next page, it says our relationship with God based on its need for outside authority. So just finding that really interesting when I was reading this 19th Gene Key again, it just feeling like I didn't have this huge relationship with God, but really tuning into the relationship I've had with myself my whole life. It's been very contemplative, and being able to, see the faults within myself or the shadows, and also see the gifts within those shadows. So when Gene Keys showed up in my life, it was just like, it didn't even have to be explained. It was just the feeling of, yes, thank you. The feelings that are sometimes within me that I can't articulate are right here within this unlocking of just memories and feelings that those memories hold within ourselves. So I think it's really amazing that I've gotten a chance to kind of contemplate with someone who has the Gene Key, who I know just as much as myself. So it's been a really big gift. And I know reading this Gene Key that my mom's probably more on the reactive nature, and I'm definitely more on the repressive nature. So it's fun to kind of see that bouncing off each other too. So yeah, that's all I really have to say right now.
So we haven't really talked about mom and what happened with mom. Should we talk about that next, or did you guys want to add
I
something?
found something quite interesting. I bet Alison's got a question or two as well. That's just such a rich tapestry you have there. And I was kind of wanting to, seeing as we started out talking about the core wound and that we're in the 32, I just kind of wanted to bring some freshness to that. In that, the ancestral reverence, which is the pathway of that, seems to, I'm just seeing that how the 19 is playing out with that in the ancestral past that also picks up on, and how codependence works with that. So kind of seeing a correlation between the two. And then I'm also wondering if when you said, Emily, that you perhaps you didn't identify at all with the God worshipping, did you perhaps worship your mum, because she was an anchor with a line 1? My mum has a line 1 in her design, and she's very much an anchor, and there's definitely some similarities in our family fractals. And so I just want to ask you that question, because I certainly worship my mum, because there was no God stuff in my family either. So the only person I had to kind of venerate was my dear mummy, who's downstairs.
Actually, that is super interesting. I don't think I've ever been asked that, so I love that. How I saw it is starting from earliest memories of moving to California. We were always in contemplative talk as a family. Like, we had the numerology book. We had, there's just so many personality quizzes. I feel like me and my brother were always taking to assess like where we were, or like our place in this world. And I think from a young age, I noticed that my mom played this amazing devil's advocate, just this unbiased person that I could go to with that knew me and kind of was totally accepting of the emotional waves that I had, while also honoring, where this outside entity could be as well. So I think from a young age, she's who I went to for advice that I knew I could trust and knew that I saw probably, even if I felt a certain way, if she said it, I would probably go lean more towards taking my mother's advice. So yeah, I think that is a funny little thing that I did is putting
Yeah, I
on a
just kind of
pedestal.
felt it. I was just like,
Oh,
oh, well,
yeah,
who did you
definitely.
worship then? I mean, you know, like, because I think the word venerate is brilliant because, you know, it also means reverence, which is about, you know, holding them in high esteem. So
Mhm.
maybe the change, you know, the worship isn't necessarily the best word, but when we're talking about a mum, you know, it's a brilliant word, isn't it? Because mums are great, you know.
He's on the
And
pedestal.
so that's fine, and I'm sure they do that to us too because they learn equally. You know, like having children is a course in self-development. Sure, I haven't got any yet, but I believe they are. Thank you, Emily. So you're muted, Alison, if you're trying to talk,
Yeah,
sweetheart.
I just unmuted myself. So I wanted to pick up a little thread because Emily, in your poem, the line that really jumps out at me is "I come from French cooking," or something like that, and I do as well. So my mom used to go weekly to this chef called Jean Louis, and she'd make these amazing dishes and bring them back. And I mean, my mom and dad were very strict Christians, evangelical Christians, and there was no freedom of thought allowed in our house, which I really rebelled against. So it sounds like the opposite of your house. But what was central was this food, and there was something about it being French food that was quite exotic. You know, like if I think of my grandparents would eat sort of sausages and cabbage and potatoes, you know, and that was it. Whereas in our house, we just had this amazing array. So I guess my question is like, um, just about the French cooking, you know, what energy did it bring to your family? It might seem a strange question, but that's the thread I've picked up really.
So are you asking me,
Well, I
Allison?
mentioned it in my
Okay.
poem
Okay.
because I don't think it's necessarily that I was getting plated French cooking in front of me. It was the constant conversations about the cookbooks, about my my mother's culinary upbringing, and I think it was very. I have a very big childhood memories based around food. A lot of vacations based around what restaurants we were going to eat at and events. Nothing else mattered except the menus, like, because that was a love language. It was how people were going to feel and, you know, understand. So I think for me, where I put French cooking into my poem, because my grandma was just so proud of my mom and who she was as a chef. And she honored that. Like, she couldn't wait to just tell everyone about how amazed she was, like, with my mom's cooking and how she studied French culinary cooking and all this stuff. And it was always a huge poignant memory. It's like my grandma would say, "Oh, your mother can make a piece of sourdough toast taste gourmet." It was just this huge. It was true though. There's 100% truth behind that statement from my grandma that I resonate with, because I felt the same way. It was this, it's just, the French cooking to me represents just love. It represents a way of like infusing love and like just feel goodness into something and having that just be enough. So that's where it resonates with me. I probably couldn't name one actual French dish, but just with my mom's culinary background and the sourdough toast, and the butter is key. We put butter in everything. It's those memories that make me like, emit little pieces of joy, like where I catch myself smiling for no reason, or like wellow and then just want to cry. I just thinking of those little moments of like my grandma being so proud of my mom. So yeah.
I bet Lanie's dying to say something now about the French cooking. It'd be great to hear from you, Lanie, about how you kind of, how the influence that your grandma and you had, like, you know, and how that maybe that reflected through your chart.
Yeah, my maternal grandmother really didn't, I mean, she did cook, but I didn't ever see her as a cook. I saw actually my Aunt Ruby, who lived in Salt Lake City, as more of my mentor. And due to, money and the way the Mormons lived, they grew everything in their backyard. So my Aunt Ruby would race out to the yard and pick cherries and run back in and make a pie. And then she would go pick peas. And I mean, she was cooking all day long, and the food was really good. So when my parents actually started buying TV dinners, because they grew up with that, my father's mom was a Norwegian chef. Well, she wasn't a chef, but I mean, she made everything homemade, and he referred to her as a chef. They were used to that. They were happy with the TV dinners because it was less work. But I always had such nostalgia for the food that I grew up with that was home cooked. And my mom loved Paris. She loved being, exuberant and, putting on the scarf and putting on the St. John suit and going out with her bags. And so a funny story is we went to, after my parents got divorced, they had planned a 25-year anniversary trip on the Orient Express, and then they were going to go to Paris. They got divorced shortly before. And so my mom took me to Paris, and we stayed at the Ritz, and we went to all these restaurants. And the first restaurant that we went to, actually, I could read the menus because I had a culinary background and I knew how to count the money. I know those two things. I did not speak any other French. So we look at the menu, and I think I'm doing, the right thing. And out comes a big pot of peas, and we each had a whole chicken. So we each had a poulet sitting in front of us, and we laughed about it like for 3 days straight. So my mom lived and breathed Paris, and you would have thought she was from Paris. She could be very dramatic, but she also had very good taste and impeccable manners, which most of my Mormon relatives did. That was important. But she also took that very seriously. So.
Hey, Lanie, I just want to come in here and say we've got some really lovely messages from the listeners. I thought I'd just give them a shout out. I won't read all of them because there's quite a few here, but Tamara says greetings to lovely people. There's Vidya, and I hope I pronounced it right, says namaste, hola, and hello. And she's a Jinkies. I don't want to say junkie because that's George's name, but she's a Jinkies junkie. Linda Heinemann is here. We love Linda. She says love to all. Some of the lovely messages are Alicia Young says mucho for 6 lines. Robin Cabral is making French toast while you speak, and she's loving the sharing and the interaction. Flower Gypsy says, "Lovely, Emily." An ecstatic mother, Swami Vitrag, welcome, is watching us. That's absolutely wonderful. He's been a friend of mine on Facebook for quite some time, so it's nice that he's joined us in our cafe today. Who else? Candice Co is watching, and she says, "Awesome, Emily." Tamara says, God is a concept that puts the source of all that is in a container which humanity can relate to. I wonder if she's talking about a Tupperware container here to put food in. Let's have a look what else. Yeah, Robin Cabral, he says it's great that they're relating the gene keys as well as relating the mum and daughter and all in the panel, which, you know, is really beautiful. And I just want to come in on that a little bit because I'm listening to you and to your such a beautiful story of transmuting, taking the best of Emily's grandmother, your mother, you know, honoring and loving all that she is, and also seeing the trauma and then going and getting help and healing the codependency, GK19, the alcoholism, and then but really committing to being an allowing and accepting and embracing mother, which is, you know, we talk about that quite a lot in the Gene Keys. And it's a conversation that, you know, in this cafe and among us, and those of us who are trying to, you know, light ourselves up from inside out and in the world, that it starts with children. You know, it starts with the parenting. And to have two people, two beings here, you know, sharing this out in the world is precious because it's showing us that, you know, look at what is achieved when that work is done. You know, it just touches my heart. Yeah, and I know with Phoebe, I mean, this is why, you know, I knew Phoebe would really enjoy. I've met Phoebe's mum. You know, she's an amazing woman, a force of nature, and they live and they have this wonderful relationship. And you know, I think there's a commitment with all of us here. I loved my mother too. However, and so I put the work in, but she wasn't aware of this sort of work. But as a mother, I loved her. However, we weren't as advanced as you two are right now. And I know Robin, sorry, and I know Alison is, you know, was recently sharing that she's been immersed in her mother-daughter relationship on many levels, really. So I just wanted to say, you know, I'm really grateful that you've come and you're sharing this wonderful subject. Nancy Organezov says, Lanie Steinher and Emily Steinher, your poems to one another were amazing. I loved hearing them, and they were absolutely amazing. And Candice Co says, I'm going to have to listen back for those poems. And there's a few more messages, but I just wanted to shout out a few. And yeah.
Maybe if Emily and Lanie are agreeable, we could post the poems on the thing afterwards, because I'd love to read them as well, look at them in a bit more detail.
Sure. Sure. Well, I think this is leading into the next phase here of the transmuting, the feminine ancestral wound, talking about mine and Emily's relationship with treading the golden path and the gene keys, in regards to my mom as well. So let's see. In 2016, January, I was invited to a gathering of sound healing and a woman saying, I found this awesome system. I can't wait to introduce it to everybody. So Emmy and I show up, and she starts, you know, she's using the Gene Keys book as an oracle, and she opens it up and starts reading from it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds like human design, which I had kind of dabbled in just a tiny bit the year prior on my own, trying to figure out, couldn't put it down. And so we're at this gathering and we're really intrigued, and I start going to a group where we're treading the golden path together. And one of the women, Kate, who was really good friends with the Wonderland team in Portland, recommended that we go to a workshop in San Rafael. So we did that. It was Teresa, Elijah, Amelie, and Theo. And and Emmy wasn't with me. I was there with Kim and Karen and Adam and Dean and Kate. Anyway, so I have an open solar plexus. I'm sitting next to Kate, who has a defined solar plexus, emotionally defined. And I'm seeing my profile really for the first time, and the codependent stand out. And I am so emotional for 2 days where I'm almost dry heaving. And it was safe to be unsafe. It was safe to be in emotional turmoil. In fact, they were encouraging it and being very tender towards me. So on the way home, going across the Bay Bridge back to the foothills, I start feeling really sick. And there's no place to pull over. And I'm literally throwing up on myself. I get home and my husband said, did you start drinking again? And I said, no, I have just had this experience. I can't even articulate it. Well, 4 days later, my mom passed suddenly, traumatically, in a car crash near Las Vegas on her way home from work. And everything tilted on its axis. I picked up my kids. We went to Las Vegas. We were living in Sacramento at the time. And it just was a whirlwind of bringing back her stuff, crying, divvying up stuff, emotions running amok, my sister flying in from Cleveland. In fact, all the stuff that you see behind me is hers. I now am living in Seattle, Washington, and we, with my mom's tree out front with her ashes, and it's called Lurie's Landing. And in fact, we just had a sign painted to commemorate that. But anyway, it was just an upheaval. And Emmy and I ended up going to a Gene Keys retreat in Santa Cruz with the Wonderland team in June or something, June or July. And this happened March 31st. And we processed with 20 people sitting in circle, and you could have heard a pin drop. The mindfulness, the respect, the love that was emanating from every single person held Emmy and I in such a container that we were able to go really deep into our grief. And again, leaving that retreat, like every time there was a break, I had to go lie down in the room. Like it just was, there was so much. But I was having my experience with my mom passing. Emily was having her experience, and we were having our experience together. So the following year, I was in a spiritual directorship training and addiction counseling at a community college, and I dropped both of those. I finished the year for spiritual directorship. I didn't enroll for the second year. I dropped out of school, and all I did was show up to this Gene Keys group. And I showed up messy. I showed up uncontrollably emotional and everyone held space. And the Wonderland team just enveloped me, all of them, and became like a new version of family that we created with the loss of our beloved matriarch. So, Emily, did you want to talk about that at all?
I'll say a few words. Because all my life growing up, I never once heard anything like, it was well known. And it's not just for me. This is like an experience with my brother and my cousins as well. Like, my grandma was the cheerleader of the family. She was the pillar that really held up a lot of just like everyone's number one fan. Like, just to think of like that person that will just love you and encourage you beyond like saying, probably lying to your face, like, you could not look good. Oh, you look great. Like, she was just that person that you need, just the ray of positivity. And so when her death happened, I felt like such a part of a will was taken away. And I have an open will center. It's my only open center I have. So I feel like when I have the will to do something, it's very special to me. And having that motivation is really inspiring within like myself. Like, oh, I have motivation. Like, I'm feeling good. But that I felt like for so long, it just took that away. It was like, if she's not here to witness it, then why? And it was such a dark, pessimistic place. And I think going to that retreat on, that was the first time I noticed how much like our cellular body can hold emotional memory and trauma and contort it in ways that like hold us like my posture like was keeping me here instead of wanting to be seen. Like, I just wanted to shelter myself away from the world, and just all these things where I felt that I finally touched upon mentally in the space that was being held for us at the Gene Keys retreat, that it just unlocked a waterfall of, it felt like this, but it's actually this. No, wait, it's actually rooted in this. It's completely different. But those feelings like that it just brought up for me, it was just so connected, where it really, I was able to process a huge trauma that had happened a couple of years before that I just completely rolled over, just kind of streamlined over it. It's fine. I thought I was fine. I'm young. I'm resilient. We're fine. Things happen to people and we can move on. But what that realized when my grandma passed away is sometimes those feelings inside our body don't move on and they're still there. So I think the positive thing I see out of the death was realizing that processing is so important, and being able to talk openly about your feelings. And grief is so many stages to grief, and I really realize that now. And just allowing myself the opportunity to be present with each stage was such a blessing, because I think especially now there's so much stimulation going on. It's so easy for us to distract ourselves from pain or hurt or those uncomfortable feelings. And that's all we did, was just sit in that uncomfortability for 2 days. And I think it was the most healing thing I've ever done, because I explored those depths within me. Like, I was being honest with myself, and it felt so good to be able to know that I can be sad. Like, it's okay to feel lost, because yeah, I don't know, it's still alive within me. She's still here. So yeah.
Thank you, Emily. That's beautiful. And really, I feel some, great message for people listening who, whatever age they are, grief can hit you, and to share your experience from the Gene Keys, from being held in a group, and from recognizing and well, being in a safe place where you can go deep, 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 and feel those feelings in stages and recognize those stages. I think it's really important, a wonderful message that you're giving out there today, when we are in a time when people are maybe feeling this grief is coming up, to know that you know, find that space, find that group of people, reach out to the Gene Keys or other groups or any of us here, to go into this space. I loved, Lanie, you talking about human design and talking about the different centers, you know, and anybody who wants to know about the human design, Lanie, I know Phoebe's a human design practitioner, for want of another word, that has dived deeply into this, and so it's wonderful for, you know, to have this system, and to be able to relate it and to hear it from a young person as well, you know, somebody who's right here, right now in the groove. That's my attempt at being, you know, being hip. But all of those words went out like 30 years ago, so that's how non-hip I am. You know, but what I'm saying is it's delightful because you know, I'm newbie at the Gene Keys. I've only been doing it for 2 years. You know, I've been down the deep dive in the activation twice, and I'm going to dip into the Venus sequence again, and it'll be my second time. The first time, the second time in a container. And, you know, I'm just beginning to know who I am. I remember, Lanie, when I came first, met you in the Delta, another wonderful experience. First heard about it from Phoebe, who actually, it was, no, the Gene Keys, Alison here is the hub here, who brought us all together, really, because I went and studied the Gene Keys on my own, as you do, you know, and did all the programs and tried to read the book and got overwhelmed and thought, my God, I need some help. So reached out, looked on a map somewhere to see who was a Gene Keys had groups, and I found Alison's name. Alison put me in touch with Phoebe. Phoebe put me in touch with Human Design, and from then, you know, I dived, and then I heard about the Delta. So the first time I was able to come in the Delta, I went in to do the Delta. Amazing experience. Anybody out there who hasn't done the Delta, do the Delta. An absolutely incredible experience. I'm in it for life. And I met Lanie in the Delta. And in the early days, I remember, you know, saying, I've done this with the Gene Keys, I've done that, and I've done the other. I always remember you saying, a little while on, when you got to know me and you got to know what you know, how far you could sort of push the boundaries a little bit with me. I remember you saying, well, you're just beginning, really. And I thought, oh, and that was then. And now I realize just how just beginning I really am, because it's vast. But even the beginning of it, even right now with the Gene Keys, you know, and I'm so further along than I was, I am anchored in myself. I'm embodied in who I am, and it's the first time that I've done something spiritually that is about me. And it's not about it's all about me, but it's all about me fitting in with all of you. It's about me being able to be me just as I am and be accepted by all of you, and me accepting all of you. It's like taking all the competition out there and just really holding the container for us all, the space for us all. Yeah. So I just thought, yeah, do come in, Phoebe.
I was just going to say, because I remember when you first started the Delta, and I was doing a Delta at the same time, and I think you were one position ahead of me. So when whatever you were experiencing, I was going into the next week, and I was on Delta 5, you were on Delta 1, and it was lovely just to stand back and listen to you, you know, without telling it. And it was inspirational for me because you're doing it for the first time, so I'm getting like looking through the eyes of a child, and you're doing all of these experiences, and then you're telling me like where you're what you're experiencing, and I know that I'm stepping into your shoes. So it was a really lovely experience. And your first week, because you were given position 4, Okay, which is brilliant because, you know.
And Lanie had position one, I remember. I'll come about in a moment. Do chip in, everyone. We're in the cafe talk now.
Yeah, we're flowing. And Akusi just like said, oh my goodness, Phoebe, like everybody's just like kind of love and light. And she says, and I'm sitting there and I'm really pissed off. And like, you know, and it was wonderful for me to hear. And I wouldn't say anything, like, you know, I was just thinking, well, she's having her experience. And I suppose what I'm talking about is divine will and letting yourself like kind of be taken over by this amazing container, you know. So everybody might have been like kind of bugging you, but in a way they were holding your space, and then eventually your dam just broke, you know. I mean, and you were holding such a momentous position. Position 4 is the most difficult position, Gene Key 59, in the whole of the Delta, and you went straight into it. I mean, I was like kind of so buzzing for you, but I couldn't tell you anything because it was your first time. It was such a wonderful experience. And I suppose I wanted to kind of link that into what Emily was talking about with her will. And I was really touched by your story, Emily, and really want to honor your grandma right here, right now. And I know how that feels to have a cheerleader, somebody that just is just so formidable in their character, and that you will know that they will have had the similar experience. So you just trust them implicitly, and they become all that is, you know, and there is nothing more. They're like our Neptune, you know, like just the Shakti energy that goes, the universe singing through us, you know, and that they mean everything to us. And I think it's really wonderful how you've responded to it, and you're clearly blessed, you know, for the positions that you've been in, you and your mum, what's been presented to you at the right time, because when that is taken away from us, and I've only contemplated this, it hasn't actually been taken away from me, but when my mummy had a very severe heart attack, I went through the dark night of the soul and understood that I had to get in line with my ancestry and let that breathe me rather than my mum breathe me. Now, my mum has Neptune Gene Key 64 on top of my Mars, which is Gene Key 64. And it's really interesting that she was all that was until I understood that she's not going to be around all the time. So I kind of, there's a real relatable point for me here, and it was wonderful how you expressed it. And I suppose I want to ask you the question, and I kind of know what the answer is going to be, but I'd love to hear it in your own words. You know, how did you kind of reorientate yourself? You know, because it seems as though your will being open and that you identifying with something has to be very special for you to align with it. You know, how does that manifest for you now? Because, you know, your grandma was just telling you were great, 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 and now you've got to tell yourself that you're great. How does that work?
I don't know. It's hard for me to like openly talk about this part of myself, but I'm gonna do it. I think especially when this happened, I think I got more in touch with kind of being in open communication with like spiritual guides, and not necessarily I felt like they were spiritual guides, but I felt like my grandma never really went away. Like there was still, especially since after the retreat, we were exploring downtown Santa Cruz, and there was this booth. My mom loves the story. There was this booth set up, and it was a telephone booth like in London, and there was this woman dressed up like Frida Kahlo right next to it. It wasn't any time near Halloween either, just dressed up next to it. And she was like, kind of, I was interested, so I went up to her. I was like, what's going on? She's like, you can talk to the dead. Here's a phone booth, like just call whoever you want to call. And I was like, okay. And I did. And I think that was so therapeutic for me, just to get on the phone and talk to my grandma like she was still there, like to tell her all these things that I was doing. Like I was moving to LA, and I was like, beginning all these things that's like I would want her to hear. And it felt like in that moment, like she heard me, like I was understood. And that feeling of like, well, now who's excited for me? It didn't go, I didn't experience that. It was, I still felt very held in that comfortability of like, she knows, she's excited for me. And I think seeing that more and more after her passing too, just really starting to notice numbers and synchronicities and signs and animals that really speak to me, especially animals. Like, it's so funny because she hated birds, but every time I see a bird and we have eye contact, it's just something so moving and like very, it touches me, and it's like I'm being communicated with, and or just the feeling of like a blanket's like, it's all good, everything's gonna be okay. It's just, I can't even articulate that or what that is, but it's just that feeling. And so yeah, it's all weird. It's never been, it kind of scares me sometimes. It's like, am I just doing this so I don't fully integrate a new system into my life? I don't know, but I just, something feels so right about knowing that she's not really gone, I guess, is how I feel.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Emily was 20 years old when we went to that Gene Keys retreat. And she showed up as her own person. She wasn't even, I mean, she came as my daughter, but not really. She came as Emily. And Emily, since she was very, very young, has been drawing angels and was very in tune with nature. She would say things like, Mom, look at that streak of mauve in the sky. And she would be talking to all the animals on properties that we lived on. And so what's been really engaging with the Gene Keys as well as the transmission is like the dream arc and the wisdom keeper cards. Rosie was at the retreat with us, and I've continued to use the cards, and Emily uses them as well, which are very symbolic. So it's an all-encompassing system that brings up feelings, right, and deep dive philosophy, and just it's just, for me, what Gene Keys represents is a way of noticing when I'm open-hearted, my 4-6 profile, versus closed down, aloof, how to love more, how to be love, how to show up in a way that's honorable and respectful and mindful, because how other people have shown up for me. So uh, it's just been life altering for sure. And I mean, Emmy was introduced. I mean, I was, I had their astrology charts and I did their Enneagram number. And my sister would say, oh, be careful when you walk into a room, Lanie's going to call you a number. So I did all kinds of things, and that's for sure. And the depth of Gene Keys and the inclusivity, the lovingness of it has just, again, this topic of healing the ancestral wound. I mean, I have, the patriarchy very strong in my upbringing, which my mom rebelled against. And I really think that she saw Emily as a new day. And from the very beginning, she never treated her like anything but special, magnificent, capable, strong. You don't need a man. If you have a suitor, that's great, but you don't have to have a man to be somebody. So,
Lanie, I just want to say you know, since meeting you in the Delta, I was as you know, we then buddied up, and I had this conversation with you. And the first thing that I noticed about you was how you, because we were, well, I was new. I don't know who else was new, but we were in the group, and you just, as a number one, you just were so powerful in yourself and set it up really for the rest, you know, for the entire flight. In that you were really present and really humble and really gentle. And in my, because this is about you and Emily, and I just want to shout out for you because you're shouting out a lot about other people here. And my experience of you is I go to your book club once a week and we study the gene keys. And you facilitate, and you do it in such a way that is strong and powerful. You know your stuff. You have the human design there. You have the charts there. You have the book there. You know, and yet everybody in there is given a space and a voice, and that in fact, you know, it's like a synarchy experience, and you really allow people to come out and embrace who they are, and however they're feeling without any judgment, and you do it with such strength and reverence, and so I just wanted to give you that shout out. And you're very knowledgeable. You know, if there's a line or an essence or something that we're not sure about, I've asked you questions before, and you've come back and you explain things, and you'll even explain the shadow. I remember we were talking about my gene keys, and I was looking at my shadow, and one of them, you know, is arrogance, and you said, yeah, but this can be, you know, this is, you put it in a actually, you allowed me to see where I was being arrogant without me feeling any shame or embarrassment or wrong. In fact, you lifted me up by just sort of opening the door to it in a very lovely way. And I think that is a really special gift. So I just want to say, yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for all that you do quietly behind the scenes. And I can see Emily's nodding there. So, yes, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I had a question for Emily. I'm interested in gene key 19. My partner has that twice in her Venus sequence. So that's quite a roller coaster ride.
Which gene key?
19.
19, yeah.
The codependent one, yeah. So so we kind of cycle through codependence and various addiction cycles, and we always get into a better place. But it's a challenging gene key. So I was just wondering, have you managed to kind of avoid the addiction side of that gene key, kind of because you've had such good experiences, maybe compared to many kids of my generation? I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying, really. I'm just wondering if the younger generation are managing that better than we did. Maybe I'm putting it that way.
Yeah, I think the power to notice it within yourself is the most important, because I could be in it, like in the cling. I think codependence comes out mostly in my relationships, is where I see it play out, because it's like, oh, duh. But no, for a lot of people, codependence can play out in different ways. But for me, it's my relationship intimately, like with people, is where I get codependent a lot. I kind of turn into the ball of cling, and just noticing it within the moment, like, can save so much of activating other shadow frequencies within myself. I think if I can just catch it, then like I can just set myself back to equilibrium. I don't need to be vibing on this higher frequency, but just to go back in. And I think a lot of the codependence and the repressive nature is like the neediness of acting out in any forms, negative attention or good attention, just to receive the attention in general, I think is so played out within social media these days, within kids my age. Any sort of attention is good, you know, like we have people getting famous for doing horrible things just because they're getting those constant views and things like that. So I think it's so good to be conscious about yourself, and when that triggers into, here I go, I'm stepping outside of my equilibrium into someone else's sphere in hopes that they'll understand where I'm at or something like that. So I think, yeah, just having these tools where I've just started to catch myself like, oh no, like, where it's just, I can detach from that immediate trigger, then I don't go into like my other gene keys, like force and addictiveness and things like that. I don't go into that behavior because I can just kind of like catch it. I don't have to be, you know, put on face and like, okay, I'm fine now. It's not that. It doesn't go away, but just bringing it back in, I think, is a great tool. And yeah, it just hopefully just really noticing screen time for myself and how that can affect, and like, you know, seeing all of these new documentaries and things like that about the damages of social media. So I think, yeah, I think there's amazing tools in all of it, but if you can just be so aware of yourself and be able to call a spade, like, it's okay, there's no shame to the game, just bring it back in. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's amazing actually, because I hadn't thought about the social media and like as a codependence, but it is really, if your mood is really decided on how many likes your post is getting, and then if you don't get likes, you know, it's like, what is it, you know,
Yeah,
you're
my
kind
self-worth.
of inwardly. And yeah, I mean, that's so actually in many ways that, like, there's so many more ways you could interact codependently in the world now than maybe when I was a teenager in South Africa. We didn't have the internet, you know. We only got TV when I was 9. So, yeah, thank you, because that's sort of that's a revelation really, to look at like how people are behaving around social media. And this gene key, I think, is a very interesting way to look at it, get more insight into it.
I just want to say we've got about 10 minutes, you know, in the timeless time. And so if anyone's got any questions that they want to get out there, get them out now. And I just want to, just before we do that, I want to say thank you. Just, you know, if now really, to everybody that's joined us in the cafe, listeners, and to the hosts, Alison, Phoebe, lovely guest, Emily, Lanie. It's been a joy. It's been a lovely chat, cafe chat. And this is what it's about, just having a conversation, having a chat. You've been absolutely amazing. So, and I just want to wonder if Alison, if you want to do an ending blessing, because I know you're expert at that sort of thing, just a little blessing at the end. But before that, please carry on. If there's anything you want to get out there, we've got about 10 minutes. Let's flow with it.
It needs to be touched on, because it's just too big a thing to not notice 10 sixes in a chart, and you both got 10 sixes. So how I would identify 6, I've got 1 6, it's in my SQ, and I did so it's and I've had a boyfriend recently who had the 6, and so he tended to isolate himself. But when he was in his gifts, he would be, as me being a 1, his 6 really came out in asking why. He was just so inquisitive. I've been quite fascinated by the sixes as well, because when they sit on the rooftop, they start to look to the next gene key. So if I'm a 21 line 6 in my SQ, then potentially I'm a 51 line 1 as well. So I just wondered, after that little discourse there and my idea of what a 6 is, what it means to you, because you've got 10, Lanie and Emily, how your cellular wake-up calls work.
Well, I know for me, so one of the systems we've been talking about is the Enneagram. And, I did that way back in the day. And it was really hard for me to figure out what number I was, because those 10-6 lines were 3 lines, right, when I was young. So I got into all kinds of trouble. And when I talk about it, people don't believe me, because now I seem so different. Yeah. So my life's work is 444, right? And then my purpose is my evolution, right? The opposite of my 44-4 is 24-4. And then my radiance is 33-6, and my purpose is 19-6. And I would say that my biggest, and I touched upon this in the bio, but my biggest joy is spiritual deep dive, but to bring all these different elements together. So Akusi was very sweet with and kind with drawing upon. I do have intimate Gene Keys groups that I've done. I've been treading the golden path for 4 plus years. And that's been wonderful. And I introduce a lot of newbies into the system, which I love. But then when I have, especially in-person retreats, which haven't been happening because of COVID, I love to invite people in that have a special gift that only enhance the experience. And I think my 10-6 lines allow some space, some objectivity where, hey, let's combine with the 44-4, hey, let's all get together and play and deep dive. And I think I am able to hold that space for everyone and be objective enough where I don't get hooked as often. But when I'm doing my own process, completely different, and going to a retreat. So it's both and, where if I'm going someplace else and I'm not in charge, boy, all the gloves are off and I'm in it. I'm in, the emotional soup, which I need to be in order to come out and then be more objective and hold space for everyone else.
So you're seeing line 6 as space holders then?
I see it as objective space holders.
I like that, because the 21, is about valor. So for me, I saw the 21 as the space holding. It's one before the 22, and it's about, if I'm shining light on the other person, then I'm allowing them to have their authority. So I was seeing it as 21 as the space holding, but actually it's probably both, right? But I only have one in my chart. It's interesting because I am in a one-to-one. I feel like I'm a really good space holder. I can kind of just burn stuff with awareness. I don't get triggered by the other person. I've done some real deep stuff, like on retreat for 3 days in a go, and I'm just so consistent with it. But yeah, I'm really, I love your answer. Thanks for your insights there, Lanie.
So Emmy, how do you experience the 10-6 lines? Because you're still kind of a 3 line, although she's far more wise than I was at her age. Oh my gosh.
I really see it as a lot of it is objectivity. I've always kind of seen myself as this detached person naturally. I always say there's like 10 different Emilys in one, and they're all like having conversations with each other at once, and they all have different opinions and different ideas of what I should do. I don't have multiple personality disorder, but it is that just the debate that I think I can have with myself, that very light banter of not getting attached to a single idea, and kind of resonating with multiple ideas. I think that's what I noticed on my line 6, is that you start reading a little bit of line 1, I'm like, line 2, line 3, totally, line 4, yeah, line 5, yeah, line 6, and it's just like slam dunk. So it's just really noticing kind of where I can relate with people a lot, is where my line 6 really plays out, is being easily relatable to many avenues, I think. Because I've always, and my parents too, we look kind of one way, but we act kind of another way, and then we do things a completely different way. Like you can't really like pinpoint us down as this themed group of people, because I think we're all so different. And I think that's a lot of the line 6s playing out with me and my mom. Is just like, we just constantly are rebranding ourselves. Like, I don't know, it's just that we're constantly shifting because there's new things to be done and new ideas and new inspiration. So
That's brilliant. So AI can't read you then?
Well, maybe.
That's
Well,
so
thank you
cool.
for bringing that up, Emily, because that's kind of what I was telling Akusi. And I've kind of been worried about this. Akusi's like, "Oh, I want you to come on the show." And I'm like, "Well, I don't have a website. I don't have a business currently. We're in transition. We are reformulating." And it's exactly what Emily said. Like, okay, I had I had my gig, my thing going on in California. Now I'm in Washington, close to the Canadian border, and then COVID hit, and I'm revamping what my identity. I don't even like an identity. First of all, I don't want to be branded to any identity. I want to be able to shift and be in the flow with the rhythms and cycles, right? Which is the 30-second gene key, my vocation. So anyway, I appreciate, Akusi, you having us on and giving us this space to talk about our family stuff. I, without, having a business or a focus on something that, we can offer. Basically, we've just shown up and offered, our story. And for that, Akusi, I thank you, and Allison and Phoebe for being such great listeners and asking questions and engaging with us. It's meant a lot.
I say the we, and I know it's a we. It's been a delight, and we've learned so much. And go into the cafe because there's some lovely messages here, some lovely comments. And I just want to say that, so you're the space holders for no shame to the game. No shame to the game. Brilliant. And Robin loves that too. Your answers so 6-4, so 4-6. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Phoebe, for brilliant questions, and Alison for holding the space and wonderful questions. Thank you, everybody that's listened again. Thank you so much, Emily. You are an absolute delight. I love you, Lanie. I love you all, and I love all the listeners. I'm just in love at the moment. And so with that, I'm just going to say, thank you, and we'll sign off with beautiful Alison.
Okay, so earlier when we were talking about God, concepts of God, a poem jumped into my head by Saint Teresa of Avila from Spain, who amazingly for her time in the 16th century believed that God resided within ourselves. And I love this poem, and so this is a blessing and a poem for us to finish today. Concepts, a jar we break. Anxious to see you, I died to the world. Hearing your voice at the city's edge, at the horizon of form and space. How could I then notice anything handmade? How could I adore or suffer time? Anxious to hold you, I forgot myself completely, but you did not care about the way I came to look. I mean, your shape and mine, what were those? The seed husk that falls, because it could not contain our mingled feet. Anxious to see you, our souls became your glory, our eyes became your fire. All concepts of God are like a jar we break, because only the infinite can contain our perfect love. So we leave you with those beautiful words.